Hey guys, tonight we're slipping quietly into the damp, narrow streets of 12th century Europe. A place that smells like rotting vegetables, wet stone, and 1,000 unwashed bodies all fighting for air beneath the same ragged clouds. You find yourself here, cloaked and anxious, standing at the edge of a dimly lit alley where your boots squish into something you'd rather not identify. The torches on the wall flicker like dying fireflies, casting long shadows that dance across cobbled roads slick with yesterday's rain and maybe yesterday's blood. You're not a merchant or a pilgrim. You're a person who's been hired to make another person not exist anymore. And while that might sound like the job of a professional, the truth is you're here because you're desperate, hungry, and probably not very good at life choices. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. What's your location and local time right now? Drop it in the comments so we can see who else is lurking in the dark with us tonight. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You step forward, the alley swallowing you whole, your feet remembering every crack and rut as you glide past shuttered windows with crooked wooden planks. Somewhere in the fog-choked distance, a dog howls, but it's cut off quickly, almost like someone didn't appreciate the canine's musical stylings. You wonder if the same fate waits for you. Because in this world, assassins don't wear sleek black hoods with custom leather. You're lucky if your clothes don't announce your poverty before your dagger announces your intentions. The city, maybe it's Rouen, maybe it's York, pulses with danger. Merchants shout at each other over barrels of pickled fish. Drunks argue about which saint can cure gout. And the only thing thicker than the fog is the suspicion lingering over every face. You walk with a false confidence, eyes darting from rooftop to rooftop, expecting a crossbow bolt to punch you into oblivion at any moment. Because medieval assassins didn't just worry about missing their target. They worried about being someone else's target first. Somewhere in this maze of mildew and mystery lies your assignment. You know their name, a vague description, and that they've upset the wrong person in the wrong way. Maybe it was a petty insult to a noble. Maybe it was a priest caught collecting more than confessions. But whatever the reason, you're expected to make the problem disappear. Quietly, quickly, and without implicating the person paying you a pitiful handful of silver coins. The widely accepted fact is that the medieval justice system was terrifyingly efficient for the rich, but hilariously arbitrary for everyone else. An accusation from a noble could mean your head on a pike before you even realized you'd offended them. Your boots leave faint splashes as you pass the town's central square, where a wooden platform reminds everyone that public executions are the highlight of the week. A headless dummy waits there, propped up as a not-so-subtle warning. You swallow hard. You think you're different because you're smart, because you're careful, but deep down, you know everyone who's walked this path before you thought the same thing. And most of them ended up either dangling from that platform or feeding rats in a dungeon. A gust of wind rattles the iron sign above the tanner's shop, sending a waft of something so foul you nearly gag. You lean against a slimy stone wall, catching your breath, trying to slow your hammering heart. Overhead, moonlight cuts through the haze for just a second, revealing the network of wooden beams, rooftops, and laundry lines that could hide a dozen eyes. Or archers. Or worse, someone like you. Because assassins didn't exist in a vacuum. They competed, they betrayed each other, and sometimes your biggest enemy wasn't the person you were hired to kill, but another blade chasing the same paycheck. You edge into a side street, so narrow you have to turn sideways to avoid knocking over a barrel leaking sour-smelling brine. In the dark, you almost miss the shape of a beggar curled into the recess of a doorway, eyes glinting as he watches you pass. Does he know what you are? Does he care? He could sell your secret to the city guard for a crust of bread, or he might be too lost in his own misery to bother. Historians still wonder if medieval beggars were a secret intelligence network unto themselves, whispering who passed through town and who didn't come out alive. You reach the small square, where a crumbling fountain struggles to spit out a thin stream of water. Here, the shadows feel thicker, almost protective, but you know it's an illusion. The reality is that every dark corner is a trap waiting to spring. You see the flicker of a candle in an upper window, a silhouette shifting behind yellow glass. For a moment, you imagine they're watching you specifically, that your every step is already known, cataloged, and marked for a price. You shake the thought away, but it lingers like an itch you can't scratch. Your dagger hangs heavy at your side, not because it's big, it's a simple, rusty blade, but because it represents every wrong decision that led you here. You remember how it felt holding it for the first time, the thrill, the fear, the sense of power. Now, it feels like a lead weight pulling you deeper into a grave you haven't dug yet. A lesser-known detail. Many assassins carried knives more suited for kitchen work than killing, because blades specifically designed for murder were rare and suspiciously expensive. If you got caught with one, good luck explaining why you needed a stiletto for chopping turnips. A sudden creak above you makes you press flat to the wall, your breath held as two figures stumble out of a brothel's second-story window, giggling and entirely uninterested in you. You exhale, realizing how quickly life and death cross paths in a city like this. The night air grows colder, wrapping around you like a damp blanket, and every time you blink, you expect to open your eyes to the face of someone who's found you first. You remember what the old man who hired you said: "Don't trust the darkness. It's already working for someone else." His words echo in your head as you creep along, watching the flicker of torchlight bounce between wooden beams, illuminating shapes that vanish before you can focus. The weight of every sound presses on you. The distant clang of church bells marking midnight, the shuffle of rats in the gutter, the faint whisper of prayers from someone too afraid to sleep. You reach the edge of the merchant district, where shop signs creak on rusty hinges and the smell of old spices hangs heavy in the air. You imagine how different this place must look by day. Bustling with buyers haggling over dried fish, children darting between carts, hopeful eyes scanning for a better life. But right now it's just you and the night feels endless. The moon slides behind clouds again, throwing everything into a darkness so complete it's as if the world itself has stopped breathing. You grip your dagger tighter, every step a careful negotiation with the stones beneath you. You're not just worried about guards or rival assassins. You're worried about the city itself. Medieval streets were dangerous even without murder on your mind. Uneven paving stones, twisted ankles. Open sewers swallowed the unlucky, and sudden brawls erupted over spilled ale. Death was always around the corner. Your only job was to make sure you weren't the next to meet it. A horse snorts nearby, hidden in a stable whose door hangs crooked. The sound makes your heart jump. You swallow down the rising panic, reminding yourself that tonight, you have to be the predator. But a joke bubbles up in your mind. Something about you being more like prey, trying desperately to cosplay as the hunter. You smirk despite yourself, because gallows humor is all you have left. Somewhere above, the stars glint weakly through breaks in the clouds, tiny pinpricks of cold light reminding you how small and alone you really are. You think of all the others like you who must be out there, slinking through other cities, haunted by the same fears, driven by the same hunger. Do they ever stop to wonder if the next breath will be their last? Do they dream of softer beds, warmer meals, safer lives? As you turn into a final, even darker alley, you catch the faintest sound of a church bell tolling far off. 12 slow, mournful notes marking the hour. Midnight, the witching hour, the time when the line between life and death feels gossamer thin. You know, this is the moment your night truly begins. Your pulse steadies, your feet find a rhythm, and the shadows seem to welcome you in their cold embrace. The city feels like it's holding its breath, and you hold yours too, because in this job, silence isn't just golden, it's survival. And tonight, survival is your only plan, because you just stepped into the shadows of the 12th century, and you're about to find out why being a medieval assassin was less about skill or courage and more about the simple, terrifying question of how long you could avoid the blade meant for your own back. You're given a name. That's it, just a name. No address, no sketch, no clue what they look like or what they've done. You're told to make it clean, which in medieval terms is like being told to juggle fire while blindfolded in a barn full of hay. You're not entirely sure if the man who handed you this assignment is your employer, your handler, or just someone who wants you dead but is too polite to say it out loud. All you know is that this is your first job, and it's already starting to feel like the setup for a bad joke you don't get to hear the punchline to. Your cloak is still damp from last night's fog. Your boots are sticky with whatever passes for street drainage around here, and your stomach hasn't made peace with the half loaf of moldy rye you shoved into it this morning. Still, you move. You have to. If you stop, if you hesitate, someone will notice. And in this world, being noticed is only slightly better than being stabbed. You've heard the stories, fresh-faced killers given impossible missions, targets surrounded by guards, or worse, not even real targets at all. Just bait, just traps, just proof that you were never meant to survive long enough to be paid. You slink through side streets as the sun sinks behind slate rooftops, its weak orange light casting everything in the color of old bruises. Somewhere behind you, someone coughs and spits. In front of you, a chicken pecks at a broken sandal with far too much enthusiasm. Everything feels wrong. You were told a man would be in the tavern near the old mill, sitting by the window, wearing a blue cap. And that's what you're holding on to. Some flimsy promise of precision in a world built on rumor and rot. The tavern squats at the edge of the square, its wooden beams sagging like tired shoulders, its windows glowing with firelight and the slurred sounds of arguments halfway to violence. You hesitate just outside the door, heart pounding with something that's not quite fear, not quite excitement, more like resignation. You tell yourself this is what you signed up for, though if you're honest, you don't even remember signing anything. Maybe you grunted. Maybe you nodded. Maybe you were just hungry, and someone offered you a future in exchange for a past you were already trying to forget. You push the door open. The smell of spilled ale, sweat, and overcooked mutton wraps around you like an old blanket soaked in vinegar. Heads turn. Just a few. Just enough to make your skin itch. You walking like you belong there, even though you're pretty sure you'd rather be literally anywhere else. Yes, even back in the alley with a rat orgy behind the baker's shop. Your eyes scan the room. There, by the fire, blue cap, slumped shoulders, the unmistakable posture of a man too drunk to notice his own name. You move closer, each step rehearsed in your head, but still somehow awkward, like you're dancing to a tune only you can hear. You reach into your cloak and feel the hilt of your knife. Not yet. Wait, just a little longer. You stand behind him. He doesn't notice. His cup is nearly empty. His breath smells like apples and regret. You glance around the room one last time, and then you freeze. There are 3 men watching you. You don't know how you know, but you do. One by the bar with a twitchy hand. One near the stairs pretending not to listen. And one just outside the window, barely visible, but standing too still to be anything but trouble. You look back at the drunk. His hand slowly inches toward his belt. You've been made. You move. Fussed. A flick of the wrist, a sharp sound like a sigh, and he slumps forward onto the table. Not dead. Not yet. Just out. You didn't come here to get caught on your first job. The room erupts in movement. Shouts. Chairs scraping. Someone throws a mug. and it shatters against the wall where your head used to be. You're out the back door before anyone else figures out where it leads. Your feet pound the mud-soaked alley, slipping on something that smells distressingly familiar. You vault a fence, crash through someone's laundry, and land in a cart full of hay that you pray doesn't belong to a pitchfork enthusiast. You lie there for a moment, heart hammering, try to remember if you stabbed him deep enough to keep him down, but not so deep that the job becomes a murder rather than a warning. That's the thing no one tells you. Sometimes you're not hired to kill. Sometimes you're hired to scare, to send a message. And sometimes you're just hired to draw out the real killer. Because here's the truth. Your first job is rarely about your target. It's about you. Are you predictable? Are you clever? Are you expendable? The people who run this shadow economy don't want soldiers. They want puppets, disposable ones. And you're looking very disposable right about now. You roll off the hay and land hard, jarring your ankle. The stars overhead are cold and indifferent. You limp into the shadows, trying to figure out if this is still part of the test or if someone just decided to cut the rope early. You find shelter in an abandoned shed behind a smithy, the walls scorched from a long-ago fire, the air thick with soot and silence. You sit in the dark, blade in hand, watching the cracks in the boards for movement. You think about the man in the tavern. He looked familiar. Was he even the right guy? Historians still debate whether medieval contracts were ever as organized as later legends suggest. More likely, it was word of mouth and whispers, and people got killed because they looked vaguely like someone else wanted gone. You remember a story you heard once about a would-be assassin who killed the wrong monk, only to find out the real target was sitting 2 tables over. He was given a second chance, which is to say, they gave him 1 day's head start before sending dogs after him. No one ever saw him again. No one ever found the monk's body, either. You wonder if that's you now. Marked, tested, failed. Maybe someone's already been told you're not worth the effort to keep alive. Maybe someone's already following your trail through the mud, checking every dark corner, every half-burned shed. You press your back against the wall, breath shallow, knife ready. But no one comes. Hours pass. The moon arcs across the sky. Somewhere a rooster crows. Way too early, like it's an awesome joke you're not meant to get. You finally sleep, but only barely. The kind of sleep that doesn't rest you, just pauses the dread long enough to remember what it feels like to let your eyes close. In the gray smear of morning, you emerge. The city is waking, clanking and yawning and pretending nothing ever happened. You walk among it again like a ghost, unnoticed, unimportant. You pass a woman with a basket of eggs, a boy chasing a wheel, a priest muttering curses at his own sandals. Life continues, and that's the strangest part. You almost died last night, and nobody cares. You make your way back to the contact point, a half-collapsed bridge where water rushes beneath stones older than anyone alive. There's a man there waiting. Not the same one who gave you the job, but maybe related. Maybe not. These people have a way of appearing just when you start to think you're safe. He doesn't ask what happened. He doesn't say whether you passed or failed. He just holds out a small pouch that clinks like a promise and smells faintly of iron. Payment, or bait for the next trap. You take it. You don't speak. You just nod, turn, and walk away. And somewhere in the back of your mind, a thought curls up like smoke. You did the job. Or at least, you survived it. For now. But if your first job was just a test, what exactly are they preparing you for? Hiding, as it turns out, is a full-time job. Not just during the hit. Oh no, it's every moment between breathing. Because the thing nobody tells you about being a medieval assassin is that you're never off the clock. You're not just hiding from your target or the city guard. You're hiding from suspicious neighbors, gossipy innkeepers, stray dogs that won't stop following you, and sometimes even your own employer. The simple act of existing with your head still attached feels like an unspoken crime. And worse, medieval cities aren't exactly brimming with places to disappear. Stone walls echo every footstep, wooden floors creak like traitors, and even shadows have their own informants. This morning you wake to the smell of burnt onions and wet wool. You're tucked into the corner of a hayloft that's barely big enough for a goat, and judging by the smell, a goat was definitely here recently, possibly still is. Your limbs are stiff, your cloak itches in places you didn't know had skin, and there's a bit of straw in your mouth that you're too tired to remove. But you're alive, and in your line of work, that's practically a win. You shift slowly, try not to set off another avalanche of rustling hay. Down below, in the stable beneath you, someone is tending to a horse. You hear the rhythmic scrape of a brush, soft muttering, and a heavy sigh that suggests either chronic back pain or severe lack of gratitude for not being a professional killer. You envy them for a second, then remember the smell. Never mind. You stay still, counting your breaths. There's no door to bolt shut, no windows to leap through if things go south. Just slats of old wood, a pile of straw, and the hope that the stable boy is as uninterested in the ceiling as everyone else in this town seems to be in minding their business. The thing is, you've learned quickly, hiding isn't about vanishing. It's about blending. Vanishing makes people nervous. Blending? That's survival. You move like you belong, even if you clearly don't. You walk like a merchant, slouch like a drunk, scowl like a peasant who hasn't seen a bath since last summer. You become invisible not by disappearing, but by becoming someone so unremarkable they forget you were there the moment you leave. Still, the hiding places are never good. One night, it's a dung cart. Another, the crawl space of a bakery that smells like yeast and broken dreams. You once spent 6 hours curled inside a wine barrel and came out smelling like a tavern floor. And yet it worked, because no one looks for an assassin who reeks of sour grapes and mild regret. The widely accepted historical fact is that medieval cities were labyrinths of poorly lit, overpopulated, and incredibly unhygienic spaces. That's good news for someone trying to stay unseen, until you realize everyone else is also hiding. From taxes, from spouses, from knights who like to borrow citizens for forced labor. So when someone lingers too long in an alley, people notice. Not because they're suspicious, but because they've claimed that spot already. You slink out of the loft around midday, making sure the stable boy is distracted by a particularly uncooperative hoof. You stick to the alleys, the long, serpentine ones that smell like fish guts and old cabbage, the ones where sunlight dares not tread. You count steps, 17 to the fishmonger's, 10 to the tanner's door, 3 to the loose stone you can pry up if you need to hide something flat and incriminating. You map the city not in streets, but in shadows. A lesser-known detail? Many assassins in your situation carried simple bundles of charcoal dust. Why? 4 quicks smearing across the face, cheeks, forehead, under the eyes. Instant grime, instant anonymity. You carry a small pouch, and when a merchant stares too long, you duck around a corner and smear yourself until you look like you just lost a fist fight with a fireplace. You pass under a narrow bridge where water drips constantly, forming a puddle so foul it's gained sentience. A guard looms nearby, his armor squeaking like a pig in boots. You duck behind a cart, holding your breath, every muscle stiff. The man leans against the bridge's stone edge, sighs, and starts humming a love ballad. Terribly. He's not here for you. Not today. But still, you wait until he leaves. Because one wrong step, one glance too many, and suddenly you're that guy who looks suspicious near the bridge. You think about your training, not that you had much. It was less of a curriculum and more of a crash course in not dying 101. One tip stuck with you. Never hide in the same place twice. Obvious, but brutally true. You used to favor a crumbling chapel with a hollow crypt beneath the altar, until one morning you found a rat inside, wearing a piece of someone's ear like a crown. That was the end of that. You duck into the back entrance of a bakery, nodding at the old woman kneading dough with hands that look like she could crush rocks for fun. You don't speak. She doesn't ask. You're not the first to slip through her kitchen unnoticed. She gestures vaguely toward the back room. You stay for 5 minutes, warming your hand by the oven. Then you're gone again. The deeper into the city you go, the harder it becomes to tell who's watching. The cobblers, the butchers, the boys who sell candles with stolen wicks. All of them have eyes that dart too much, hands that fidget like they're counting secrets. And you get it. Everyone's hiding something. You're just better at it. Hopefully. You duck into a tannery when a troop of soldiers marches by, their boots stomping in unison, faces grim with the kind of blank suspicion that makes your spine curl. The smell here is ungodly, boiled urine, and something that might have once been an animal. You crouch behind a barrel of lye, pinching your nose. They pass. No one looks in. You wait, just to be safe, long enough that your knees start questioning your life choices. Then you slip out the back. Somewhere beyond the market, near the weaver's hall, there's a staircase leading into an unfinished cellar. It's your new favorite hideout. Cool, dark, quiet, and probably crawling with spiders that would politely request your eviction if they could speak. You sit there now, eyes closed, breathing slow. You've made it through another day, but you can't relax. Not really. Not here. Because hiding isn't rest. It's just slower running. You think of all the people who've disappeared from this city. Not because they died, but because they hid too well. Became ghosts. Whispers. Rumors told by drunks in taverns. He vanished, they say. Slipped into the stones. You don't want to vanish. You just want to make it to tomorrow. You think of the hayloft, the bakery, the cellar. None are permanent. All are borrowed. And every hiding spot has an expiration date. That's the real danger. Not being found, being forgotten. If no one knows where you are, no one knows if you're alive, or dead, or worth hiring. Historians still debate whether early assassins had support networks. Safe houses, coded messages, dead drops. Most agree it's more likely they relied on instinct, improvisation, and the goodwill of people who hated authority more than they feared the law. You've learned to barter not with coins, but with silence. A good secret, it turns out, is worth more than gold. And you've got a few. You lean back against the cellar wall, staring at the low ceiling, the flickering candle stub dancing on a cracked shelf. You think of tomorrow, of the next mark, of the people already whispering your name, whether to hire you or to bury you. The candle sputters. The shadows shift. You sink deeper into the dark, cloak wrapped tight, every muscle coiled like a wire. Somewhere above, a church bell tolls, long and low. And still you don't sleep, because hiding is never passive. It's an act of constant tension, of being everywhere and nowhere, of disappearing into your own skin. You're a shape in the shadows, a breath between blinks. And for now, at least, you are still unseen. You have a weapon. That's something, right? A dagger you picked up from a shady man with 3 fingers and a permanent twitch, a little bottle of poison that may or may not be just strong vinegar, and a small garrote that smells faintly like the smoke ham you borrowed it from. It clinks gently in your cloak like a guilty conscience. But standing across the square from your newest target, a noble with a blood-red cape, 3 rings on each hand, and a security detail that could repel a small army. You start to realize something unfortunate. You're not equipped for this. Not even close. You were told he walks alone sometimes. That he slips away to meet a mistress, or take confession, or visit a certain tavern where the ale is bad and the privacy is worse. That was clearly a lie. Right now, he's surrounded by 10 armored guards and, for some reason, a goat on a fraying rope leash. The goat stares directly at you, suspiciously, like it knows. You duck behind a vendor's cart, trying to look like you're just a hungry peasant admiring rotten fruit. Your fingers tighten around the hilt of your dagger. It's curved, not because it was forged that way, but because someone stored it too close to a fire and the metal warped. It still cuts. You've tested it on pigs, and once on a very impolite pickpocket. But cutting and killing are not the same thing. And when your target is nestled inside a phalanx of chainmail and horse sweat, your best blade might as well be a butter knife. Still, weapons give you confidence. False, dangerous confidence. You remember your first job, the thrill of palming a knife, the way it seemed to hum with possibility. Now it just feels like extra weight, because no weapon you carry can slice through a noble's paranoia. These people are trained to expect betrayal. They bathe in it. Their guards don't blink. Their horses look like they've seen battle. Even their servants glance around like they're waiting for the sky to fall. And this noble, he's worse. He flinches every time someone speaks his name. He wears a mail shirt under his tunic. You can see the outline. He twitches at shadows. He's the kind of man who might kill his own shadow, just in case. Rumor has it he once exiled a bard for rhyming too sharply. You try to get close, just to see the pattern of his movements. But even then, a guard steps between you like you've tripped some invisible wire. You back off, quickly. Walk like you have a purpose, arms swinging a little too much. You duck into an alley, kneel, and rethink everything. The problem is simple. Your tools are small. Your targets are big. And unlike in the tavern tales, assassins aren't handed magical blades or potions that guarantee death with a single drop. You're working with what you can find. A rusted blade, a rope, a borrowed vial of something that stinks like overripe garlic and has a 50-50th chance of doing absolutely nothing. The widely accepted historical fact is that most medieval assassins didn't use elaborate weapons. They relied on utility, speed, and the element of surprise. The rest was mostly improvisation and panic. You check your pouch. One of the corks is missing. The liquid in the bottle has leaked out and stained your cloak a blotchy green. It smells like pickled feet. You sigh. There goes the poison. You're down to one weapon now, the dagger. You call it lucky, mostly because it hasn't snapped in half yet. You start to think about what it means to actually use it, to plunge it between ribs, to feel resistance and panic and the messy aftermath no one writes songs about. You're not a knight. There's no armor, no shield, no code. Just sharp steel and the hope that nobody notices before you run like a terrified squirrel. Sometimes the people you need to eliminate are alone, vulnerable, bathing in a stream with their eyes closed. But more often, they are well-connected, well-protected, and well-aware. They carry swords longer than your arm and friends who can swing those swords better than you can blink. You try a crossbow once. Spent an entire week's pay to borrow it. Took an hour to load. Another 2 hours to figure out how to hold it without looking like a confused scarecrow. You missed a shot by several feet and nearly hit a baker's wife. She chased you with a broom and the strength of 1,000 unbaked loaves. Lesson learned. Never mess with bakers. Or crossbows. You think of all the flashy weapons you've heard about. Assassin's rings with hidden blades, powders that choke without a trace, darts tipped in frog venom. All fantasy. Or, if real, reserved for people with powerful backers and actual paychecks. Not you. You're scraping by, relying on luck and a very sharp stick. A lesser-known detail? Some assassins simply used food. A bad oyster. A tainted piece of meat. Death by diarrhea doesn't make for good ballads, but it's effective. Sadly, you're not much of a cook. The one time you tried to poison wine, you mixed up the flasks and ended up sick for 3 days while your target stayed perfectly alive and very entertained by your public vomiting. You peek around the corner again. The noble is climbing into a carriage. The guards surround it like ants on bread. The goat hops in behind him. It's wearing a tiny collar with bells. You suppress the urge to laugh. The goat stares directly at you again, and for a moment you wonder if it's enchanted. Historians still argue whether certain nobles employed animals not just as pets, but as early warning systems. There are accounts of attack swans. Attack swans. You think, maybe you don't need to kill them today. Maybe you need a new plan. A better one, with fewer goats. You retreat into the crowd, disappearing behind baskets of eels and loud men selling shoes with questionable stitching. You need new gear, but new gear costs coin, and your current job doesn't pay until completion, which means you're stuck in a loop. Need weapons to kill target, need kill to get paid, need pay to buy weapons. Medieval economics at its finest. You stop in a blacksmith's alley, watching the forge hiss and spark. Hanging on the wall are weapons far superior to yours. Swords with polished edges, maces that gleam with menace, even a few knives that don't look like they were found under a cabbage cart. You reach out, then quickly pull back. You can't afford them. And worse, buying a new weapon makes you visible. The smith will remember your face. So will the apprentice. And the boy sweeping ash who looks at you like he's memorizing your features for a reward poster. You turn away. You'll make do. You always do. Because here's the ugly truth. Even the best weapon won't save you if your timing is off, if your intel is bad, if the goat really is a warlock's familiar. You walk through the evening crowd, head down, heart thumping, lucky tucked in your belt, cloak tight around your frame. You know you'll need to strike soon. Tomorrow, maybe. Tonight, if the goat falls asleep. You'll have to wait. Watch. Find a moment when the guards are distracted. When the Lord is drunk or bored or too far from his little pet alarm bell. Your weapon won't help you find that moment. It won't protect you from what happens next. But it's all you've got. A piece of bent metal and a prayer. You pass a fish stall and steal a small bone-handled knife from an unattended basket. Add it to your belt. You feel no guilt. If it comes down to you or the fishmonger, you're choosing you. You always do, because weapons don't care who's right. They only care who gets to walk away. You duck into another alley, the sun low, the sky bruised and pulsing with crows. You sit. You sharpen lucky on a stone you keep in your boot. A slow, quiet rhythm. You breathe. You wait. Somewhere, not far off, the noble laughs. The goat bleats. You smile. Maybe tonight. Maybe tomorrow. Either way, you'll be ready. Or at least, as ready as anyone can be when their fate depends on a dagger that's slightly crooked in a town full of people who would sell you out for a roasted chicken leg. You grip the blade, and for a moment, it feels light again. Like possibility. Like control. Like maybe, just maybe, you'll survive the night. Nobles are twitchy creatures. And you, as a medieval assassin, have just made the fatal mistake of thinking they were stupid. You assumed wealth made people soft, like putting in silk robes. But now, as you press your back against the cold stone wall beneath a castle window, listening to armored boots echo above, you're realizing nobles don't just get rich. They stay rich by surviving people like you. The noble you're after tonight, he's not just cautious. He's the living embodiment of don't trust anyone, with a paranoia level that makes even the village cat look suspicious. He's moved rooms 3 times this week, sometimes in the middle of the night, sometimes more than once in the same night. No warning, no pattern, just fear and candlelight and a barely suppressed scream when someone knocks on the wrong door. You inch forward, creeping past the tapestry, depicting some heroic battle no one remembers. It smells faintly of mildew and pomp. You've cased this castle for days, learned the guards' routes, even figured out the servant who delivers the wine every evening. But this noble, this wiry, shriveled lord with more secrets than teeth, hasn't touched his goblet in 4 nights. Apparently, a cousin of his died after a particularly suspicious cup of mead, and he hasn't drunk anything he didn't pour himself since. You squint into the gloom. There's movement, a flicker of candlelight. 2 guards outside the door, as expected. You're not sure what the goat is doing there, but it's tied up and looking at you like it knows what you did last summer. Maybe it's the noble's last line of defense. Honestly, given how things have gone, it wouldn't surprise you. Nobles have the luxury of being afraid. While you sleep in haylofts or damp alleyways, scratching lice and regretting your choices, your target sleeps behind 4 layers of stone, a rotating guard schedule, and, if the rumors are true, an astrologer who swears they saw a shadow over the moon last night and demanded a bloodletting just to be safe. The noble did it, too. 3 leeches on the neck. Just in case, he muttered, pale and wide-eyed. You shift your weight. This is the part where your fingers start to go numb. Not from fear, but from cold and pressure and the kind of patience that's been worn razor thin. And just as you reach for your dagger, a familiar face steps into view. Your contact, the servant. She glances around and gives a quick nod. It's time, or so you think. She knocks gently, murmurs something, and the door creaks open. You hold your breath, but the man who steps out isn't your target. It's another noble, shorter, fatter, draped in fabrics that shimmer even in the gloom. You don't recognize him. He mutters something to the guards, who both chuckle, and then they all walk off down the hallway. Your contact slips away without a backward glance, and you're left standing there like an idiot, dagger halfway drawn, heart hammering against your ribs like it wants to file a complaint. Because here's the thing about noble targets. They swap. They fake their own deaths. They hire doubles. They create decoy chambers. Sometimes, they let assassins get just close enough to prove they're being hunted, just so they can flush out their enemies and strengthen their own power. It's not paranoia. It's survival. There's a popular story in court circles right now about a duke who caught an assassin because his dog barked oddly at breakfast. Just once. A single growl. That night, the assassin was found in a wine cellar dead. Some say poisoned. Some say skinned. No one says anything out loud anymore. Historians still wonder if that story is true or a cautionary tale turned boogeyman bedtime story for young squires. But the fear it inspires? That part's very real. Every noble worth their salt now travels with a taster, a priest, a backup priest, a falcon that supposedly sees omens, and, yes, a goat trained to stomp its hooves in a specific pattern when danger is near. So tonight, as you pace back into the darkness, your dagger undrawn and your pride slightly wounded, you begin to realize something chilling. You might be good, but you're not exceptional. And exceptional is the bare minimum when your target has walls, gold, guards, a food taster, and probably dreams haunted by masked figures just like you. You pass a hall full of armor, suits so polished they catch candlelight and shimmer like ghosts. And for a moment, you catch your reflection. You don't look like a hero. You don't even look like a villain. You look tired, dirty, disposable. And that's what you are to these nobles. Even if they hire you, even if they whisper in your ear and pay you gold to make someone else vanish, they'll kill you just as quickly if it serves them. You're a tool, a scalpel, a shadow. And when your edge dulls, or even before, they'll toss you away like last week's spoiled meat pie. One widely accepted fact: nobles during this period went to great lengths to protect themselves, including shifting sleeping quarters regularly and keeping elite guards on near-constant rotation. Assassination was not only feared, it was expected. Power attracted danger like dung attracts flies. One curious footnote, though. There's an obscure account from a monk in the Low Countries who swore a particular noble paid 3 different actors to pretend to be him in 3 different cities, all while the real noble retreated to a monastery for spiritual protection. Did it work? For a time, until one of the actors ran off with a barmaid and blabbed the whole story to a rival house. The real noble was reportedly stabbed with a quill while writing a letter of complaint. Or so the story goes. So as you slip back into the night, you wonder, not for the first time, what keeps you going? It's not loyalty. It's certainly not the coin. Maybe it's pride. Maybe it's vengeance. Or maybe it's just that you've come too far to stop. You look up. Stars blink overhead, quiet and disinterested. Somewhere behind those castle walls, A noble reclines in a plush bed, sipping carefully brewed, hand-tested tea and dreaming of a tomorrow you may not live to see. And still you plan. You didn't become an assassin for the money. Not really. Or if you did, you were horribly misinformed. There are no signed contracts, no royal seals, no second chances, just whispers in a tavern corner, a name on a torn scrap of parchment, and a promise that maybe, if the stars align and your blade finds its mark, someone will meet you in a candlelit alley with a pouch of silver. Maybe. But tonight, like so many nights before, you're sitting in the back of a half-burned barn, soaked through from the rain, staring at a bloody knife and wondering if the weight in your pocket is enough to cover dinner, let alone the scars. Here's the truth. You're cheap. Not because you're worthless. Far from it. You've trained to kill with silence, blend into shadows, and vanish without a trace. You're dangerous, skilled, and efficient. But in the twisted hierarchy of medieval society, you're still at the bottom. Less than the butcher, less than the rat catcher. At least they can file complaints when they don't get paid. You get a dagger in the back, if you're lucky, or buried alive under a pigsty if your employer is feeling creative. And employers? They're not knights or lords standing tall in the sunlight. They're the ones behind the throne. The bastard nephew with a claim to the land. The bishop who wants a scandal to vanish. The merchant whose competitor got a little too successful. You don't meet these people in daylight. You don't know their real names. And you definitely don't get to negotiate. Kill him, they say. Make it quiet. And the gold, you ask. It'll be there when it's done. It never is. You did a job once for a baron whose breath reeked of honeyed wine and lies. The target, a rival with a penchant for young wives and illegal land dealings. You made it clean, quick, efficient, slipped the poison into a wine bottle meant for a feast. Watched as the man slumped mid-toast, face purple, eyes wide. You were out the door before the coughing started. 2 days later, you returned to the agreed-upon spot. Nothing, not a coin, just the scent of rot and betrayal. You asked around. The baron had gone hunting. No one knew where. His estate had been burned 2 weeks later. Some said by the rival's family. Others whispered it was his own guards. You never found out, but you were still out of payment, and the weeks that followed were lean. Real lean. Rats lean. You spent 4 nights in a pigsty, pretending to be the cousin of a deaf farmer just to avoid bounty hunters looking for someone convenient to blame for the poisoning. You don't complain. There's no one to listen. There's no Assassin's Guild with union rules and compensation packages. There's just rumor and revenge, and the bitter taste of knowing your life costs less than the boots you wear. And those who do get paid, don't get too comfortable. Coin isn't safety. You've seen it happen before. A job goes well, and suddenly you've got enough silver to draw attention. Too much attention. You buy a better cloak, a warmer bed, maybe even a pair of boots with actual soles. People start to notice. The guards start asking questions. The wrong noble starts watching. And then you're back where you started, running, hiding, bleeding, but this time with a slightly nicer belt. One assassin, a friend of sorts, once confided in you over a cracked jug of cider. Said he'd been paid in land. A plot near the woods, small cottage, fresh stream. No one will find me there, he said. Eyes saw for the first time in months. You never saw him again. Some say he retired. Others say the land was cursed or a trap, or maybe he just got lonely and soft. The life doesn't let you go. Not easily. Not without taking everything from you first. Even when the money does come, it's stained. Not just with blood, yours or someone else's, but with risk. Spend too much and someone notices. Save too much and someone steals. Hide it and someone tortures you to find out where. You once buried coin in the woods only to return and find the tree uprooted, the earth torn apart like a starving dog had gone through it. Maybe it was a thief. Maybe it was another assassin. Maybe it was your employer, ensuring you never lived long enough to cash in. And sometimes The coin is a test. A job too easy, payment too generous. A pouch too heavy. That's when your stomach sinks. Because that much gold for a single job means you're the real target. They're not just buying your silence. They're buying you, and they'll collect soon enough. The most gold you ever earned came after killing a noble's mistress who knew too much. You knew it was a setup. You took it anyway. Spent the next 6 weeks looking over your shoulder, slept in trees, avoided bread for fear of poison. In the end, you gave half the coin away to a beggar and threw the rest in a river just to feel like you weren't being tracked. Sometimes you wonder if all this is punishment. If somewhere, some god you don't believe in is watching and laughing, amused by the worm who thinks himself a viper. You kill for gold, but you live for scraps. And the worst part? You're starting to like it. You've seen noblemen slit a man's throat for a missing coin. You've seen peasants hang for a loaf of bread. And you walk between those worlds. You have no name, no legacy, just scars and stories no one believes. You risk your life in silence. You kill without question. And your reward? A handful of silver, a knife in the back, or a shallow grave if you're lucky. There's a saying whispered among your kind. The pay is terrible if you get it. And the ones who say it with a grin are the ones already dead inside. Maybe that's the price. Not gold, not land, just pieces of yourself traded away until there's nothing left. Tonight, the rain hasn't stopped. Your boots are soaked. The firewood won't light. And the coin you did get for your last job turned out to be counterfeit, shiny on the outside, but hollow and cracked. Just like the promises. Just like the faces you once trusted. Just like you. Sleep isn't rest. Not for someone like you. Sleep is vulnerability, a window cracked open just wide enough for betrayal to creep in. The moment you close your eyes, you give the world permission to ruin you. Every assassin learns this, some sooner than others. You don't lay down because you're tired. You lay down because your body is collapsing, because your legs won't carry you another step, and your blood feels like sludge in your veins. And even then, you don't sleep, you hover. Half conscious, half ready, one hand on your blade, one ear tuned to every whisper, creak, and cough in the night. You remember the first time you tried to sleep in an inn after your first kill. Thought you'd earned it. Paid for a room, not even the cheapest one. The door had a lock, well, half a lock. The bed sagged like a rotted tooth, but you lay in it anyway. For the first hour, you listened. Listened to footsteps in the hallway. A cough 2 doors down. A cat howling behind the inn, or maybe it was something else. You heard the barkeep arguing with a woman, then the squeak of a coin pouch. And just as your mind began to fog, you heard a board creak. You're bored. The one right outside your room. You didn't breathe. You reached for your blade, held it tight, and waited. A shadow paused beneath your door, then moved on. You didn't sleep at all. That became the pattern. Town after town, village after village. If you're lucky, you find a place that smells more like stale bread than blood. Somewhere without too many eyes. But even the nicest places have rats, 2-legged ones. Snitches, drunks, lonely widows with ears too sharp for their own good. You learn to recognize them. The ones who pretend not to notice you, who glance away too fast, who whisper when they think you're out of earshot. You see them, and they see you, and sometimes they decide that turning you in to the local guards is worth more than whatever you're carrying. Even if you aren't wanted yet. You've had to bolt out of windows before, had to climb roofs barefoot, had to run into the woods with nothing but your shirt and a stolen loaf of bread. Once, you even had to strangle a man in his sleep. He'd share a room with you, cheap bunk in a poor town, offered you his food and a laugh. Turned out he was a bounty hunter, woke to the click of shackles. You stopped him before he could shout. You still remember the look in his eyes as the life drained out of him. The betrayal. You wish you could say you felt guilt. You didn't. Just cold. Cold and wide awake for 3 nights afterward. Sometimes, when you're desperate, you avoid inns altogether. You sleep in stables, in ruined chapels, Once, even in a hollowed-out tree that smelled like fox urine and mold. You don't get nightmares in places like that. Not because you're safe, but because you're already in a nightmare. It's strange, the places you begin to feel comfortable. You once slept in a butcher smokehouse for 3 days straight. Smelled like death and salt. But no one ever looked for you there. The worst part isn't the discomfort. It's the unpredictability. Some nights, you might actually close your eyes for more than an hour. And that's when it happens. That's when someone knocks on the door a little too softly. Or when you wake up with the sensation that something has moved, only to see your pack slightly shifted, your coin lighter, or your knife missing. You never truly rest. You just close your eyes and wait for the wrong thing to happen. You met a fellow killer once, an older woman with silver hair and hands that trembled when she held her mug. She hadn't slept in a bed in 6 years, she said. Not since Bordeaux, she told you, eyes like shattered glass. Didn't elaborate. She said she once buried herself in hay for 2 weeks, pretending to be dead so a gang of mercenaries would stop looking for her. She laughed as she said it, but you could see the cracks. That woman didn't fear death. She feared sleep, feared what she'd miss while her eyes were closed. It's not just the fear of being found, it's the memories. The silence of night has a way of amplifying everything you've done. You try not to think about it, but when the candles burn low and the moon leaks through a broken window, your mind drags you back. To the man who begged, to the woman who fought, to the child who walked in too soon. Your blade was silent, clean, professional, but sleep doesn't care. Sleep shows you faces you swore you'd forget, makes them whisper your name, makes them scream. And when you do sleep, really sleep, it's never for long. Maybe an hour, maybe 2. You wake in a panic, blade in hand, breath sharp. You check the door, the floor, your boots. You sniff the air for poison. You lift your coin pouch to see if it's been touched. You count the knives. You count your regrets. You listen. Then you sit and wait for morning. Even when you find a place that feels almost safe, a little hamlet by a quiet stream, an attic in a monastery, an abandoned mill, your body doesn't relax. You lie down and hear every creak of the timber, every mouse in the wall. You time your breaths with the shifting of the wind. You map the room in your head, planning your escape in 5 directions. You never take off your boots. You've learned tricks, little ones. Tie a strand of hair across the doorknob. Sprinkle dust in front of the window. Sleep on the floor, beneath the bed, or inside the cupboard if it fits. Lay broken glass outside the door. Keep it back to a wall. Never fall asleep with your blade too close. It's easy to be disarmed if you're unconscious, but not too far either. You'd rather stab blindly than not at all. And it's not just people you're watching for. There are things in this world you can't explain. You once stayed in an inn where the walls bled at night. Just a trickle, red, sticky. No one else seemed to notice. The next night, you were gone. Another time, in the north, you heard voices whispering under your bed. Couldn't find anyone. Couldn't sleep for days after that. It changes you, makes you twitchy, paranoid, sharp in the wrong places. A lover once told you that you never closed your eyes when you kissed, that your hand never left her knife. She left the next day. You don't blame her. You wouldn't stay with someone like you either. But you keep going because you have to. Because somewhere, someone still needs someone gone. And as long as that need exists, you'll be there, quiet, hidden, tired beyond words. Sleep light or not at all. That's the way. That's survival. And if one day your body gives out and you don't wake up, well, maybe that'll be the closest thing to rest you ever get. In your line of work, blades don't always come from the shadows. Sometimes they come dressed in silks, with honeyed words and manicured hands that never once held a sword but somehow draw more blood than you ever could. Politics, that is the true killer. Not the poison you slip into a goblet, not the dagger tucked in your boot, but whispers, favors, debts, names passed in confidence, alliances sealed in wine-soaked handshakes. In this game, Survival isn't about being the fastest or the deadliest. It's about knowing when to vanish, who not to trust, and why a single careless word could be your death sentence. One day you're a prized asset, a tool used by nobles, priests, or warlords to carry out the kind of work their reputations can't afford. The next day, you're the loose end, the inconvenient secret, the liability with too many names stored in your skull. And once you're on the wrong side of shift in power, the blades don't wait in alleys anymore. They come with warrants, fire, and a list of every person you've ever dealt with. You never meant to get involved in politics. Most killers don't. You start with a simple job. Eliminate a rival merchant, silence a witness, take out some wandering lordling with more pride than good sense. You get paid, you move on. But the moment you deal with power, with influence, you step into a river that only flows one way. Because the people who hire assassins aren't just murderers, they're players. And you become a piece on their board. A knight, a pawn, a shadow they use when subtlety's needed. The problem is, unlike a chessboard, in this game the pieces remember. They whisper. They hold grudges. And if you know enough secrets, if you've stood close enough to the fire, you stop being useful. You start being dangerous. You remember one job clearly. A noblewoman, lady of a minor house, hired you to dispatch her cousin. Said the man had been abusing her sister. Said she couldn't get justice through the courts. You believed her. You killed him. Clean professional. Didn't even make the front page of the town crier's bulletin. Months later, she's married to a much wealthier duke, her sister nowhere to be found, and suddenly your name is on a bounty sheet. No reason, no warning, just a sudden political shift. Her new husband didn't like loose ends. You were smart enough to disappear, but you learned your lesson. Even the innocent ones have motives. And in politics, truth is just another tool. Nothing is as it seems. You've seen the fall of entire courts because someone trusted the wrong whisper. You've worked in cities where the ruling family changed hands 3 times in 1 year. And each time, anyone associated with the previous regime became a target. Servants, advisors, lovers, hire blades, especially hire blades. It doesn't matter if you only work for them once. Doesn't matter if you were paid in coin, not loyalty. You're guilty by proximity. You're useful until you're not. Then you're dangerous. And the truly terrifying thing? You never know when the shift is coming. Maybe you do a job for a merchant prince who's trying to gain favor with the king. Seems harmless. A rival gets a sword through the ribs. No big deal. But a month later, that prince is arrested for treason. The king's court is purged. And suddenly, there are black-cloaked inquisitors at your door asking questions you really don't want to answer. Doesn't matter that you weren't involved in politics. The fact that you touched someone who was, that's enough. You begin to see why assassins don't live long. It's not always the job that kills them. It's the aftermath, the implications. Because sometimes the killing isn't the end. It's the beginning of a chain reaction that ripples through the entire power structure. One person dies, and a dozen others step into the vacuum, each one with a different agenda. Some want to forget you ever existed. Others want to make an example of you. And others, well, they just enjoy the hunt. There's a certain kind of madness that creeps in when you realize you're being hunted for things you didn't even do. You've been blamed for coups you never participated in, poisonings you weren't even in town for. Once, a high priest had a vision of your face burning in the fires of judgment. Claimed the gods told him you were the cause of the coming plague. You've never even been to that city, but now there's a standing bounty on your head and a religious militia looking to crucify you for divine balance. And what can you do? Fight back? Assassins don't have armies. You can't challenge a duke to a duel. You can't walk into the king's court and plead your case. You exist outside the system. You're a shadow. And when the people who run the system turn their gaze to you, you vanish or you burn. Some killers try to leverage what they know, trade secrets for safety. Blackmail a count into silence. Play one faction against another. It works for a while, but in the long run, it always backfires. Because secrets have weight, and once people know you know, they don't rest until you're ash in the wind. You knew a man named Varek. Smart, cunning, kept ledgers of every noble who'd ever hired him. Names, dates, payments, even the victims. Thought he could use it as leverage. Keep himself safe. One day he disappeared. Not quietly either. His head was nailed to the gate of the city hall with a note that said, "Loose lips sink empires." No one knows who did it. Every major house denied involvement. That's when you understood. When everyone agrees to stay silent about a killing, that's when you know they're all guilty. You've learned to walk a tightrope. Never get too close. Never ask too many questions. Don't memorize names unless you have to. Burn your contracts. Don't write anything down. Never stay in a city longer than needed. And most importantly, never get involved in succession disputes. Those are the worst. You kill one prince, thinking you're helping the other ascend. But then the third cousin twice removed shows up with a legal claim and a mercenary army. And now you've got 3 factions all claiming you tipped the balance. You didn't. You just took a bag of coin and did your job. But try explaining that to a man whose brother you supposedly murdered on the orders of someone who died last month. Sometimes you wonder what would happen if you just stopped, disappeared, found a farm in the mountains, changed your name. But you've seen what happens to the ones who try. Someone always finds them, because someone always remembers. In this world, the past doesn't fade, it waits. It festers, and sooner or later, someone new finds the old records. And the doors that used to knock gently, they get kicked in. Politics doesn't care if you meant well. It doesn't care if you were just following orders. In fact, it thrives on people like you. Because people like you are deniable, disposable, powerful enough to shape events, powerless to escape their consequences. And when you realize that, really realize that, you stop thinking like a killer. You start thinking like a survivor. You don't just kill anymore. You calculate. You ask of benefits. Who's watching? Who gains power if the job succeeds? And who suffers if it doesn't? You learn to say no. You learn to disappear before the dagger points back at you. You learn that the most dangerous name isn't the one you whisper before a kill. It's the one someone else whispers after you're gone. Politics isn't a war. It's a weather system. You don't fight it. You survive it. You stay low, stay quiet, and never, ever think you're safe. Because the moment you do, that's when you hear the sound of boots outside your door. That's when the sky darkens. That's when the storm finds you. And when it does, it won't be a clean death. It'll be a message. You're crouched in the tall grass again, because that's apparently where your life lives now, silhouetted against the silver light of the moon. The breeze is soft, carrying the scent of crushed herbs and wood smoke from a nearby fire. You tighten your grip on your dagger and double-check the directions one more time, even though you've memorized them to the point that they'll probably still haunt your dreams in 50 years, assuming you live that long. Your target is supposed to be encamped just ahead. Arrival night, petty lordling, something with enough land and enemies to be worth killing. You inch closer, careful not to snap any twigs or rustle any leaves, moving like a particularly sneaky badger through the dark underbrush. And then you hear it. Laughter. Not drunken soldier laughter. Not the low murmur of tense men with weapons and secrets. No, this is carefree, cheerful, and oddly musical. There's a pipe or flute, and someone's clapping along out of rhythm. You frown and press on, parting the last screen of bushes, and find a wedding. Not a military encampment, not a rival court in exile. A wedding. Torches and iron sconces line the clearing. Colorful ribbons drape from makeshift poles. A long table sags under the weight of roasted chickens, loaves of coarse bread, and suspiciously overambitious cheese. There's a fiddler dancing on one leg. And right in the middle of it all is a man you assume must be the miller, wearing a crown of herbs and clearly several meads deep into his own celebration. You blink, staring. Somewhere in the distance, a goat bleats. You consider turning back, just quietly melting into the shadows like a smart assassin should. But unfortunately, you've already been spotted. A small child, barefoot and enthusiastic, shrieks stranger with the volume and joy of someone who's never seen a man in all black leather crouching in a bush before. Everyone turns. Every single head. And now you're standing like a deer in a very badly chosen tunic, with your dagger half drawn and no real excuse for being here. Is he the jester? Someone calls out. A second voice chimes in. He's early. Start the dance. Before you can say wrong party, someone grabs you by the wrist and drags you into the light. You have two options. Murder a room full of drunk villagers, not ideal for blending in, or improvise. So you dance. Yes, you, the trained killer of men, are now hopping along to a badly played lute, dodging spilled cider and trying to avoid the too interested gaze of the bride's grandmother. She offers you a pickle and slaps your rear. You can't kill her either. That's the thing they don't tell you during your welcome to assassination briefing. Mistaken identity will get you every time. Maybe you followed the wrong set of footprints. Maybe your source was confused. Maybe, and this happens more often than you'd like to admit, the person you're hunting has the exact same name as someone else in the next village over. Historians still wonder how often this sort of thing happened. Given the lack of standardized maps, surnames, or pin location features, probably a lot. There are actual records of people being killed by mistake, then retroactively justified as well. They were probably guilty of something. But for you, the reality is simpler. This isn't your target. And now you've eaten half a roasted apple and danced with the miller's niece. She's very into you. You should not be into this. But she has kind eyes and strong opinions about turnips. You try to sneak away, only to be cornered by the bride's father, who insists you give a toast. You stand awkwardly, raise your cup, and mutter something vague about love, harvest, and the importance of community. Applause. You're stuck for hours. Eventually, you escape under cover of drunken singing and a particularly enthusiastic round of what you think might be medieval karaoke. You stumble back into the forest, caked in ash, ribbons still tied around your arm, and absolutely no closer to your intended mark. You'll have to circle back and get the correct location. But now there's a whole village that knows your face. A half dozen people think you're a folk dancer named Auric. And one old woman is convinced you're the answer to her daughter's bear marriage. It's funny. You spend so much time training to go unnoticed, to be silent, invisible, forgotten. But all it takes is one wedding, one misstep, and now you're infamous in a town you weren't even aiming for. Mistaken identity isn't just embarrassing. It's dangerous. If the wrong noble hears about this stranger who crashed a peasant wedding, they might start asking questions. And if your real target catches wind that someone is after them, they'll vanish, or worse, send someone after you. And then there's the paranoia. You're back on the road now, boots soaked and stomach growling. You pass a sleepy farm and catch someone watching from a window, eyes gleaming in torchlight. You don't wave. You don't speak. You keep walking, wondering if they'll remember your face. They always do. The next day, you finally get the real intel. Your actual target? Still in the region. Still alive. Still attended by guards. You sigh and rub the bridge of your nose. Try to ignore the fact that you spent most of last night slow dancing with a woman who believes you're a traveling poet named Bly Wind. Weapons and shadows are easy. Dealing with people who smile at you, feed you, and then accidentally ruin your mission? That's the hard part. There's a funny sort of tension that builds in your chest when things like this happen. You're trained for combat, deception, disguise. But not parties. Not mistaken hospitality. Not the warm buzz of people who expect something good from you. There's no dagger for guilt. No countermeasure for feeling human. You start to question things. What if someone hired an assassin to kill you, and they showed up at the same wrong wedding? Would they dance too? Would they toast the happy couple before realizing they've made a mistake? Would they feel the same flutter of absurdity, that quiet inner voice asking, what am I even doing anymore? You tell yourself it's a fluke. One mistake, one weird night, but you know better. Medieval life is chaos. Towns blend into each other. Names repeat. People lie, forget, or just mishear things. You once followed a man named Gareth the Red for 2 days before realizing you were actually shadowing Gareth the Bread, a traveling baker who now thinks you have a crush on him. The world is not a precise machine. It's a patchwork of accents, livestock, half-legible maps, and very confusing cousin marriages. Every job could be the right one, or just another wedding where you end up playing the tambourine with someone's uncle. And despite all the danger, there's a moment, just a tiny flicker, when you remember that miller's daughter. The way she smiled, the way the firelight caught in her hair. And for a heartbeat, you forget the job, forget the knife, forget the constant paranoia. Then you hear someone behind you. A branch snaps. You drop to crouch. The dagger's out. All thoughts of joy disappear like smoke in the wind. You're back, focused, ready. The world of mistaken identities is behind you, for now. There's a reason you travel by night, a reason you never stay in one place too long, and it's not just because you're constantly one wrong whisper away from a noose. It's superstition, the slow rot of ignorance, belief, and fear that fills every shadowed corner of this land. You don't wear a hood because it looks cool. You wear it because the moment someone sees the glint of your eyes in firelight, they'll say you're touched by something foul. The scar across your face? Proof you've danced with the devil. That twitch in your fingers when you get nervous? Must be a curse. No one ever assumes you're just tired, cold, and hunted. They see you, and they see stories the wrong kind. Superstition makes everything worse. You could walk into a village with empty hands and a peaceful smile, and it wouldn't matter. Someone's grandmother will clutch her rosary. Someone's uncle will cross himself. A child will start crying because, Mama, he looks like the man from the well. There's no escaping the lens of fear. And the more isolated the village, the more intense it gets. You ride into a hamlet where the people still believe that owls carry souls, and you're wearing a cloak made of raven feathers. Guess who just became the local harbinger of death? It's not just peasants, either. Priests, those self-declared guardians of purity, are often worse. You've been called a warlock, a vessel of a warlock, and once, hilariously, a walking omen of inverted grace. That one stuck for a while. These men, cloaked in scripture and sanctimony, don't need proof. Your silence is enough. Your hesitance to kneel is enough. The way you avoid church bells as they ring, because sound travels and you're hiding from killers, well, that means you're probably a child of the devil. Once in a town just east of the Fenwood, a friar with too much wine in his belly stood up in the middle of the sermon and pointed at you. There sits the bringer of storms, he cried, face red and sweaty. You hadn't spoken a word to anyone. Just walked in, sat down, and tried to warm your bones. The sky cracked open a moment later with thunder, because of course it did. A coincidence? Certainly. But reason doesn't stand a chance against fear marinated in dogma. The villagers dragged you out by your boots and beat you with sticks. You could have killed them, should have, probably, but superstition has rules. If you spill blood in a place already convinced you're cursed, it becomes prophecy. It becomes legend. Suddenly you're the monster from the woods who devoured poor Tom and brought fire to the mill. No one ever remembers that Tom had a crossbow aimed at your spine or that the fire was started by a drunken lamp spill. No, they only remember what makes the story better. And speaking of fire, there's always a man with a torch. He's never the smartest one in the crowd or the bravest, but he's the loudest. He's the one who sees you standing there, clothes wet from rain, face covered in mud, and decides that the best thing to do is burn it all down. He's not looking to help. He's looking for a reason to light something, and you just gave him one. You'll know him by the gleam in his eyes. The righteous fury. He'll shout about cleansing and the old ways, and something about wolves. There's always wolves. You'll try to run, but you'll trip, or someone will catch your sleeve, or the priest will shout, "Which spawn?" And suddenly you're surrounded. Torches in a ring, angry breath in the cold, and somewhere in that crowd, the man with the torch steps forward, daring the fire to get started. You had a fake seizures. Speak in tongues. Once you told a story so terrifying that half the crowd fainted and the other half begged you to leave before your words summoned something worse. It worked, but you couldn't sleep for 3 days after that. Not because of fear, but because you started to believe your own lie. That's the thing about superstition. It spreads. It infects. Even you, sharp as you are, feel in your bones some nights. You hear a baby crying in the distance and wonder if it's a banshee. You wake with a start and check your boots for salt. You whisper an old charm to your dagger, just in case. You tell yourself it's survival, not belief. But what's the difference, really? In some places, they leave offerings at crossroads, bread, teeth, blood. You've eaten the bread once or twice, just to keep from starving. Once, a woman caught you doing it and screamed so loud you'd think she saw the devil himself squatting on her pantry shelf. "You've taken the dead man's toll," she shrieked and spat at your feet. For weeks after, you had to hide in barns and sleep in trees. The entire village blamed every broken wheel, every sick cow, every lost child on you. You've been chased by dogs, had rocks thrown at your head. One time, they locked you in a root cellar and wouldn't let you out until full moon passed. Just in case you were moon touched, you sat in the dark, surrounded by onions and fear, wondering how you became the villain in stories you didn't write. And it doesn't matter who you actually are. You could be a healer, a thief, a soldier, or a runaway monk. They'll twist your story into something darker because superstition loves a villain. Villagers need a scapegoat. Priests need a sermon. And men with torches? They need a reason to light the world on fire. There's one village, Oran's Hollow, that still tells a tale about you. They say you had no shadow, that you floated above the ground, that you whispered to the cows and made the well run dry. You remember Oran's Hollow. You remember trying to warn them. Bandits were coming. You saw the signs, trampled brush, missing carts, scout tracks. But they didn't listen. They saw your scars, heard your strange accent, and locked you up instead. The bandits came. They slaughtered 10 men, burned 3 homes, and stole every bit of coin in the parish chest. But the next morning, the people didn't say we were wrong. No, they said you brought this. You left that town with blood on your shirt, none of it yours, and a new notch on your list of places never to return to. You told yourself it didn't matter, that people were just ignorant. But that's the problem with superstition. It gives people permission. Permission to hate, to hurt, to kill. And the worst part? Some of it feels true. You've seen things. Shadows that move on their own. A girl who spoke the names of the dead in her sleep. A knight who bled salt water. How do you explain that? How do you hold your ground when part of you wants to believe? So you keep moving. Never stay long. Avoid eye contact. Offer no names. If someone asks too many questions, you disappear. If someone lights a torch, you run. Because in this world, superstition is more dangerous than any sword. It spreads faster, cuts deeper, and it doesn't stop when the sun rises. It lingers like smoke in your hair or the whisper of a name you never gave. You travel alone not because you want to, but because everyone else eventually turns on you. All it takes is a cough, a lost sheep, a dream someone doesn't understand, and suddenly you're not a person. You're an omen, a warning, a curse, and no one, not the priest, not the innkeeper, not the wide-eyed child who offered you a flower, will save you when a man with the torch comes. Because they believe. And belief burns hotter than any fire. They never tell you what comes after the killing. No one sits you down and explains what the silence will sound like once the blades are sheathed for good. No songs for it, no tavern tales. Because retirement for someone like you isn't a reward. It's not peace. It's a sentence. You may as well dig your grave the day you hang up your sword, because the world doesn't forget what you are, no matter how much you want to. You live long enough to survive the blood, the lies, the betrayals. But the real trick is surviving after. Not the battles, not the hits, but the quiet. That's the part no one warns you about. When your muscles start to ache in the cold, when your hands shake just a little too long, when you stop waking up before dawn because no one's trying to kill you. At least not yet. Retirement is what they call it. But really, it's just death on a slower timetable. The grave without the dirt. And if you're not careful, the ghost you've made will catch up and finish the job. You tried once. You really did. Bought a little farm outside in nowhere village with a name like Hollow Hill or Black Orchard. Doesn't matter. It had sheep and a stream and a roof that leaked when it rained. You told yourself this was it. You were done. No more poisons. No more contracts. You even started growing herbs. Nothing special, just sage and mint and a little belladonna for old time's sake. You fixed a fence. Learned to sleep without a knife under the pillow. Almost convinced yourself you were someone else. But it never lasts. Because no one believes in a retired assassin. Not the baker, who keeps glancing at the scars on your hands. Not the blacksmith, who grips his hammer a little tighter when you walk past. And certainly not the man who once paid you 10 gold pieces to remove a rival and now fears you'll speak his name in your sleep. People don't want you to retire. They want you to vanish. Quietly. Permanently. It starts subtly. A messenger who never arrives. Supplies that never get delivered. Then a dead sheep, throat slit too clean for wolves. Then whispers in the tavern. Eyes that linger too long. You feel in your spine before it ever happens. The trap is being set. And the worst part? It's not a stranger coming for you. It's someone you know. Because the people who hire you never forget what you've done for them. And they never stop wondering if you'll do it again. Or worse, if you'll turn on them. In their minds, you're a loaded crossbow left on the table, always pointed at their backs. And sooner or later, they decide to disarm you. Permanently. The first time someone came for you after you retired, it was almost funny. A kid, barely out of his training leathers, sent to put down the old war dog. You didn't even have to use a weapon. Just a handful of dirt to the eyes and a boot to the chest. He begged. Said it wasn't personal. Said it was just a job. You let him go. But that was your mistake. He went back and told him you hesitated. That you were slowing down. That maybe, just maybe, you were beatable. That's when the real attempt started. Poisoned food. Crossbow bolts through the window. A house fire while you were sleeping. You stopped pretending after that. Left the farm. Burned it yourself so no one else could claim it. The smell of smoke stayed in your clothes for weeks. It smelled like failure. You tried hiding, changing names, even shaved your beard and walked with a limp. But a killer doesn't walk like a farmer. You can't unlearn the way your eyes scan every room, every shadow, every exit. You don't greet people. You assess them. You don't listen to conversation. You read the lies between the words. People feel it, even if they don't know what it is. And they don't trust it. They shouldn't. You've met others like you. Old knives with dulled edges, hiding behind false trades. One was a woodcarver who only carved birds, said it helped him sleep. Another ran a brothel and claimed to have found peace in pleasure, though his eyes were always on the door. One woman raised dogs, big ones, killers in their own right. She smiled like someone who'd seen too much and decided to survive anyway. But none of them lasted long. One by one, they faded, not into comfort, but into the dirt. Because someone always comes. It's not about revenge. It's about control. It's about fear. You know too much. You've done too much. You're a liability, a living record of sins people desperately want forgotten. And you can't bribe that fear. Can't reason with it. It doesn't care if you've changed, if you've laid down the blade, if you found love, or God, or goats. It only sees what you were. Even if you want a redemption, what would that look like? A pilgrimage? A confession? You once saved a child from drowning. The next week, his father accused you of cursing the river. You buried that man under the stones by the bank. You never went back. So much for redemption. Eventually, you stop trying to explain. You don't talk about the past. You don't tell people you're retired. You just drift. From village to village, from forest to ruin. Sometimes you take odd jobs, guard duty, courier work, bounty hunting when you're desperate. It's not the same. It never will be. But it keeps your hands busy, keeps the silence away. And still, the deaths come. A merchant you once spared is found gutted. A prince whose father you served dies of a mysterious fever. A name from your past appears in a bounty ledger. Then yours shows up right below it. It's not coincidence. It's cleanup. You're not a man anymore. You're evidence. You learn to stop sleeping deeply. You keep a dagger in your boot and 3 in your pack. You move with the seasons. You don't leave footprints if you can help it. You stopped writing letters years ago. There's no one left to read them anyway. But even this wandering life, this half-death, isn't safe. Because eventually, you'll get old. Slower. Sloppier. You'll forget to check the shadows. You'll trust the wrong innkeeper. You'll sleep too long under an open sky. And that will be it. Not a glorious final duel. Not a noble sacrifice. Just a cold blade in the ribs while your back is turned. And the world will move on. No one will mourn. No one will mark your grave. Because in the eyes of the world, you were never meant to live this long anyway. You were meant to die young. In a gutter. On a battlefield. Bleeding out with a grin on your face and a curse on your lips. But you didn't. You lived. And that, in the end, was your real crime. Because retirement for someone like you is just another kind of death. Slower, lonelier, quieter, but no less final. And unlike the clean end of a blade, this death comes with time, with the weight of memory, with every life you touched and ruined, every friend you never kept, every piece of yourself you lost pretending you didn't care. You once told a boy, you can't remember his name now, that every killer carries a grave inside them. He asked what yours looked like. You laughed, said, I haven't stopped digging, and you never will. So, why did anyone do this anyway? You followed the story through alleys, castles, hidden haylofts, and torchlit betrayals. And the longer you wander, the more it seems like asking why birds fly or why rivers stagnate. It's in the nature of the thing. Once you strip away the illusions, glamour, vengeance, silver coin, the reality is stark. Being a killer for hire was often the only option. The margins of medieval life were small. If you weren't a peasant, you weren't much better off. If you weren't a soldier, you had slim prospects. If you had some skill, talented with steel, silent as shadow, well, someone somewhere would pay for it. Not because they trusted you, not because they respected you, but because they needed you. And in desperate times, they needed you. Let's be honest. Choices weren't choices. Need was. A monk's child born to a scullery maid. A soldier who'd lost his pay after a battle that never happened. A scholar whose ideas threatened a bishop's reputation. Some of you stumbled in. No family left, no land, no trade. Others volunteered. At least it paid better than carting dung for a lord. You become a killer not because you're evil, but because something worse, poverty, exile, desperation, is chasing you hard enough that hiding under a rock no longer seems enough. You learn quickly what stories they don't tell, how few people stay alive long, how rare it is to collect a coin or keep a secret, how the things you kill for, revenge, justice, protection, turn out to be illusions made of silence and fear. Yet still, people sign up, because scarier than death is dying anonymous, stranded in a world that doesn't notice if you vanish. At least with a contract, you leave a mark. You leave a story, a chance someone remembers your name, even poorly. And there's a darker draw too: control. When power is held by lords and priests and warlords, the assassin becomes the arbiter of fate. With your hands and your courage or desperation, you decide who stays and who goes. There's a twisted pride in that. A belief that if you matter, even terrifyingly, then maybe you're more than nothing. It's not arrogance. Not always. Sometimes it's just the sense that in a world that drowns the poor and ignores the powerless, the only tool you get is your own willingness to kill. For some, the choice is disillusionment. Early on, the coin tastes sweet. The fear lessens. You begin to believe you're above the rules. Then karma arrives in small packages: betrayal, poisoned meals, old friends disappearing. Either you're hardened by it, or you stop dreaming. Only those who don't stop dreaming keep going, because running away seems harder than fighting on, blade in hand. Every assassin you've met has a story behind their eyes. A lover lost, a debt unpaid, a wrong that couldn't be answered by the law. Law in medieval times was for those who could afford it. No money, no status, no friends. You find another way, even if that way cages you in fear, even if that way kills you slowly. Popular tales talk about honorable killers, vengeful justice, necessary darkness. Most of that is myth. Redemption doesn't come with a black cloak. Heaven doesn't open a door once you've killed in foreign names. You don't get a blessing. You don't get forgiven. You just get forgotten or targeted. Sometimes both. Historians still debate why some medieval societies tolerated, or even encouraged, assassins while others hunted them with a fanaticism reserved for heretics. Theory says that in fragmented realms, where law was slow and fragmented, discreet killing was a kind of grim arbitration, a way to solve disputes that courts couldn't handle, or that lords preferred not to taint with scandal. You don't solve debt, you don't silence betrayal, but you neutralize them. Final, inescapable. So yeah, the odds were grim. It was a death sentence with flair. But compared to starving, being sold, being burned as a witch, sometimes it looked like the best path, even when it wasn't. Maybe the scariest truth is that when you become a killer, you join a lineage. A broken, bloody legacy of people who trade shadows for survival. And each one, no matter how young or hopeful, ends up a copy of the one before. Hidden, haunted, hunted, and yet, the first coin mattered. The first kill mattered, because in that moment, someone trusted you to be the dissolver of threats. That was power, and it gave purpose. At some point, many of you realize you'd rather risk blood and damnation than disappear without ever being remembered. Why did anyone do it anyway? Because it was a voice in a world that otherwise wouldn't listen. A shadow with teeth. A story that cut deeper than silence. A life stolen or stolen for, but lived anyway. So you keep walking, knife in hand, ash in your heart, ghost in your name. Because somewhere in the darkness, maybe a town overlord, maybe a desperate widow, someone still needs you to step into the shadows. Step forward, kill, get paid in silver that might not come, and disappear again. Now take a slow breath. You've walked this world with me, through the gunsmoke and grit of medieval ambition and desperation. But our journey isn't over. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on that steady fan for the soft hum, and let's wind down together. You're still here, still breathing. The night has whispered its secrets. The city is silent now. The fog sits low and soft, as if to cushion every step in dreamland. Let your body settle, each breath slower, heavier, drifting downward. Your shoulders loosen, your chest expands, then relaxes. Inhale, exhale. You've traveled through alleys and castles, into the hearts of those who live in fear and those who live by killing. But you're safe now. You're home in this moment. Imagine moonlight through a cracked window, falling on your skin, cool, gentle, forgiving. The night air slides through your hair, presses softly on your eyelids. Visualize a faint glow at the edge of the darkness, a single lantern that never flickers, always steady. It beckons you, but not forward. It wraps around you, a blanket of calm spun from memory and possibility. Your heartbeat slows. You've walked hard roads and darker truths. Let them fade into the hush of the night. There's no terror here, no blade, just the warm pulse of stillness. You are not the assassin anymore, just someone ready to rest. Let the shadows wrap gently around you. Let your breath find its rhythm. Let the silence welcome you rather than threaten you. Soon, your eyelids will drift shut. In that quiet space, the city and its ghosts cannot reach you. You're safe. You're here. You've earned this rest, even if it's fragile, fleeting. Keep breathing, in and out, each exhale softer than the last. Your body is heavy. Your mind is quiet. And now, let sleep come.